Hello everyone, this is Darkfire Slide, here with part 5 of our EU4 introductory campaign as Castile. In last episode, we just fabricated a claim on Aragon, which gives us the following option. If we look here, well, wait for our diplomat to get back. Okay, now when we declare war, we can see here under our list of Casus Bellis, or causes of war, we see conquest. And it's take Aragon. Now, by take Aragon, it means the actual province. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, what would we want to know if we're attacking a nation, and how do we know if we have a claim on them, and where we have those claims? Well, if we open our diplomatic map mode, which is the little dove here, or you press Y on the keyboard, you will see here, everything that's green is ours. Everything that's blue is an ally. And I believe, yeah, everything that's purple is a royal marriage. I think vassal, I forget what color vassals are off the top of my head. We'll look later when we vassalize Navarra. But what's important to us right now is these yellow stripes mean that we have a claim on this territory. Now, what does that mean? Well, I think it's best to compare it to another type of, well, something else that you can use for a Casus Belli, which is called a core. And basically, a claim and a core are both a way of saying this land is my land. If you want to sing the song that goes to that, by all means. I'm not going to try to sing it. But anyway, these green stripes mean that we have a core on the province. Now, what does that mean? That means that this is considered, like, of the nation of Castile, these provinces are considered part of our nation, even though they're not ours. Now, what does this mean versus a claim? A claim is basically saying this territory is ours, but we don't actually own it. Now, what does this mean in game terms? Well, when you're going to declare war on somebody, if you have a claim, it's going to give you the conquest Casus Belli. If you have a core on a province that somebody else owns, you have the reconquest Casus Belli, because these provinces are ours. Because these were actually part of Spain. They are a core part of what Spain is. Whereas the province of Aragon, we're just saying it's ours. Yeah, the whole province is, so we just claim that this would be a rightful part of Spain, even though it's not. Now, one thing that's important when you build your empire is when you do go to war and you take provinces, which we'll cover as we go to war, you can form more cores for your country. And you do that by taking a province in a war after a peace deal, and then under the province view, which is something we haven't even covered yet, which you get to by just left-clicking on a province, there's a little spot right here that says cores and claims, and if you mouse over, it shows all the flags, but you can't tell if it's a core or claim unless you mouse over it. So if we mouse over here in Madrid, we'll see that the only person to have cores or claims on the province of Madrid is us, Castile. But if we look here at Granada, Granada considers the province of Granada to be one of her core provinces. They have control of this province. But if we look here, Castile considers this to be one of her core provinces. So both of us consider it to be a core, which means both of us get a Casus Belli if the other holds it. Which means that we both can go to war with each other at basically any time, so long as we don't have a peace treaty. Which we do have a peace treaty with Granada. And if we look here, yes, we can start a war with them, but if we look here, and always look here before you start a war, in this left-hand space here, first of all, we're going to take a -50 aggressive expansion penalty. Now, what is that? If we look here, under the diplomacy tab of, say, Portugal, and it depends on how much they like you, but if you mouse over the opinion thing here, if you have any amount of what's called aggressive expansion, which is like when you're taking territories and things of that nature, or you're vassalizing people, you get this penalty to other countries' opinions of you, and it may even change the leader opinion of you if you do it too much. Now, something we briefly discussed earlier is the idea of a coalition. A lot of the time, what will happen, especially if you're playing a member of the Holy Roman Empire, if you get too much of aggressive expansion, other nations will start forming what's called a coalition against you. And that means that if you go to war with any member of the coalition, all other members of that coalition will fight you. So it's basically like forming a conspiracy and an alliance without forming a legitimate alliance. So a lot of nations that don't even like each other could get involved if a nation gets too greedy. So if France just started going on a crazy spree of taking provinces and beating people in wars and stuff, it's conceivable that all the major powers, Castile, us, England, Austria, even Poland all the way out here, might start forming a coalition against France to stop them from getting too powerful too quickly. So that's how aggressive expansion works. Okay. But if we go back to this screen here, we'll also notice that we get a -5 stability penalty for breaking a truce. Now, stability can only go up to +3 and down to -3. +3 causing tremendously good effects, -3 causing horrifically bad effects for your country. So even if you have the maximum stability, +3, you're going to be at -2 stability if you break a truce. So it's basically in your best interest to never break a truce. And finally, it's going to raise our what's called our war exhaustion, which is this little stat right here under our stability and expansion. Now, what war exhaustion does is it basically represents, how tired your people are of the war, if they're exhausted by it. And this happens by usually taking a lot of casualties quickly. You get it from attrition, so if you're besieging a lot of provinces, your troops are dying off because you don't have supplies, your people are going to get more war exhaustion more quickly. And basically, you get 1 point of what's called national unrest per point of war exhaustion that you have. So how does that work? Well, in each province, you have an unrest count. And if your national unrest is positive, I'm going to repeat that, then you will take a unrest penalty. So your unrest will go up if you have that. And if your national unrest is positive, that goes for every single province. So that means every single province is going to be upset with us if we do that. So that's war exhaustion and stability in a nutshell. Now, obviously we don't want to go to war with Granada because we would get all those massive penalties for breaking our truce. So it's in our best interest to wait till 1448 to do that. Now, what about Aragon? Would going to war with Aragon be a good idea? And always ask yourself that when you want to expand as a general, strategic idea. What would be the purpose of this? Well, obviously we're going to take Aragon, which is really good. It is a 7 base tax province. Now, when you want to weigh provinces and how important provinces are, if you look at each province, it's going to have this base tax stat. It ranges from about 1, even less than 1 in some cases, I think, in some colonies, but I digress. It goes from about 1 to 13 starting out. So, this province here, Madrid, is a 10 base tax. It's really good. Leon, our current capital, is only a 5, however. When we become Spain, Madrid becomes our capital, which means we get an income bonus on top of already having a 10 base tax. So that's why that's one of the reasons it's in our best interest to change to Spain, is because it does that for free. I think normally it costs 100, 200 administrative power points to change capitals. So to do that for free is basically awesome. Now if we look at Aragon here, Aragon is a base tax 7. Valencia is a base tax of 8. I don't know why my voice cracked there. And Barcelona itself is a 13 base tax province, which is amazing. Now, base tax doesn't just affect how much money you make from the province. Base tax also usually affects how much manpower you get from it, how many people can stay in the country without taking attrition, goods produced. In general, the more base tax you have, the better the province is. But also, in a war, and we'll cover this when we actually go to war with Aragon, the more base tax a province has, the more valuable it is, and the more difficult it is to take in an agreement. And also, the more administrative points it's going to cost us to turn it from a claim into a core. So we want to keep all of these things in mind when we think about dealing with Aragon here. Now, I did say we were going to try to go diplomatically, so that's our plan. But what would it take for us to vassalize Aragon? Well, we probably won't know that until we go to war with them. Because if we look here, under influence actions, if we want to vassalize them, first of all, Aragon already has a vassal. They have Naples, the province of Naples down here, is their lesser partner in one of those royal unions we were mentioning earlier that you can get with royal marriages and stuff. as well, Aragon is also allied with Burgundy, Navarra, and Urbino. And while that doesn't affect, you know, how, and while that doesn't affect, like, the vassalization agreement, what it does mean is that they're going to consider themselves to be strong. So yeah, if we look and see, Castilian military power compared to Aragonese is going to be negative 28. So even if we want to vassalize them diplomatically, they're probably never going to accept, especially because they have more than 40 total base tax in their provinces. So even if we want to do this diplomatically, we're probably going to have to go to war with them at some point. Now, if we look here at... So obviously we need to take Aragon and Valencia because they're the, you know, two of the provinces that we actually need in order to become Spain. But if we look at these other two, Perineo and Alicante, Alicante is a 7 base tax, which is pretty good. Perineo is a 4 base tax, which in some provinces is good. For us, it's not really that great, because we have 6s and 5s and 7s and 10s all over the place in our country. So we want to focus on taking, you know, higher base tax provinces. And the other reason we want to do that is because if we take higher base tax provinces from Aragon, they're going to become that much weaker. So, just something to consider as we do this. Now, after we fabricated that claim, we can go ahead and start fabricating another claim. Not dynastic. Covert actions. And it's always going to give you a list of all the provinces you can try to take. Now, Valencia itself is their capital, so we can't take it from them. So instead, we're going to try to take Alicante. Because, first of all, it's a coastal province, and second of all, it's a... it's a coastal province and it has high base tax. So we're going to start fabricating another claim on Aragon. And something nifty you can do is, in addition to seeing what claims we have, if we click on other countries, we could see, you know, if you left-click while in the diplomatic map mode on another country, you could see what what provinces they have, their alliances, and their claims. So it doesn't look like any of our neighbors have fabricated any claims on us like we have on Aragon. But if we look at France here, if we left-click on France, they have cores on all of these provinces, which means they have a Casus Belli against literally everyone in this area. So just something to keep in mind. You can always look at that just by opening the diplomatic map mode and then clicking on a country. It's very useful for trying to figure out, you know, who's got what. Especially if you're not getting notified and you're worried that your neighbors are trying to go to war with you and they're fabricating claims on you. It's a good way to be politically aware, so to speak. So that being said, what's our plan here? Well, we want to go to war with Aragon, right? We've already sent our diplomat, so we can't consider it. Our diplomat is back home. Right, click on... Oh, right, we've already sent a diplomat. Right, we can only send one diplomat a month, even if we're fabricating a claim. So we're going to wait till December 14th. Come on. As time passes and we get further into the tutorial, we may just speed up things just a little bit. But for now, we're going to take it slow and keep explaining some of the core gameplay concepts. That's our goal. Okay, so it's been a month, and we can now contemplate declaring war. So here we can see, because of the conquest Casus Belli, our war goal is going to be to take Aragon. So we want to take this province out of it, which means that in the actual war, it's going to give us bonuses if we take it in the actual war. And as well, this screen is also going to tell you who they're allied with and who you're allied with, and you know who will join and who will not. Like with the other diplomacy we've seen thus far, if it's a green check mark and it says they will accept, they will definitely accept. There's no maybes in between. It says they will probably not, they won't. Even if it's only 1 point too low, they will not accept. Now, if we look here, we would be at war with Urbino and Navarra. Now, Navarra is our ally, but if they're not our ally, we're not going to be able to vassalize them. But do we care about that really as an immediate objective? Well, no, not really. Even if Navarra did attack us, you know, it doesn't matter. And later on, because they feel threatened by us, we can just ally with them and improve relations over time anyway. And really what we want to worry about is if we let Aragon go on too long, you know, who's to stop them from getting an alliance with, say, France and getting a really good, strong ally? Now, Burgundy could be considered a strong ally, especially considering that starting out they have the province of Holland. And as you play, you'll learn some of the more important provinces, and just by their base tax and other things such as trade power. But Burgundy, I believe, is already... Burgundy actually is not in a war with anyone, so they might actually be able to help. But if their army is trapped in here, they're not really going to be able to get out and help, because typically they hate France. So that being said, we don't really have to worry too much about Burgundy. So then they're allied just with Navarra and Urbino. And between Navarra has 3,000 men in this group, so that's basically all they have. And then in this group, Aragon has 11 stacks, as they're called, or 11 regiments. We have 23 by ourselves. Now, Naples would also join, but they would have to get here by boat. So they may have us beat navally, but they wouldn't have us beat in, land army. And since all of our warfare is going to be taking place here in the actual provinces of Aragon, we're going to be fine if we go to war with them. That being said, we may wish to reinforce our lines just a little bit, so that's exactly what we're going to do. So let's see what we've got so far. We've got 8,000 infantry regiments and 3,000 cavalry regiments in this block. And in this block, we've got 9,000 infantry regiments and 3,000 cavalry regiments. So we've got about a 3-to-1 composition on our units here. So we want to try to maintain that in general. Now, other countries... let me start over. The reason you want to have more infantry than cavalry in this game, I'm going to touch on this, is that if you have too many cavalry, usually if you have 50% or like 51% versus 49% infantry, in most cases, you get a massive penalty to your combat because it's called insufficient support. It's basically... It refers to the actual tactics that cavalry use, which is generally to wait until the infantry are engaged with actual combatants, and then they go around and flank from behind, since, spearmen and pikemen are really easily able to stop any kind of mounted units. But that being said, we can look here, and we actually have options for what infantry we want in the starting point of the game. Now, we're going to be aggressive, which doesn't necessarily mean that we'll want offensive here, which is represented by the orange dots. But having one offensive shock is going to make us do that much more damage during the shock phase of combat versus 0. Now, morale damage is nice, but generally speaking, I much prefer having shock. So I'm going to change all of our infantry to halberd infantry, as opposed to Latin medieval infantry. If we look here at our Latin knights, we actually have an opportunity to give them a different unit as well. So I think we're going to go ahead and try out the chevauchés. I am going to pronounce it as. I'm probably horribly butchering that, but hey. And it's important to note that, see how this green bar is now red? Every time we change unit types, even when we unlock new infantry, and, new units in general, morale is going to plummet. And if you don't have... Think of morale as like a health bar for your entire army. Because without morale, your army is just going to rout. They won't die necessarily, but they will retreat, and you will lose the battle. But we've changed our units, and that's fine because we're still waiting for this claim to fabricate on Aragon. And it tells you, if you mouse over it, that it's going to recover by 21% every month, or 0.63. So they'll have full morale again in about 3 or 4 months. In the meantime, we are going to try to build more units. So, one last thing we're going to cover, and then we're going to end this video, is when we're in our unit production tab, which we get to by clicking this red button here, the production interface, it's the first tab, we can look here, and before we look at the actual units, which we've already done, we can look here at our army force limit. It says 23 out of 30. Now, you may think that this means that that's the maximum number of troops we can actually build, period, at the same time. What it actually means is you can support 30 troops at their normal income. So it says that halberd infantry maintenance is 0.21 ducats per month. So if we look at our income, we've made plus 7.41 this past month for whatever reason. We've gone down from 11 in the meantime, but so as long as we're within our 30 force limit, that's how much these infantry are going to cost. For every unit over the force limit, you will incur massive penalties to your income. That doesn't mean you can't do it, but you can't, you can do it, but you will take massive penalties. So, generally speaking, you want to stay within your force limit, except under very specific circumstances. Generally, when you're losing a war, or you're fighting a superior opponent, and you have money to burn, then you can go over your force limit and fight them that way. Although, it's not really a sustainable thing to do, because the penalties to income are that massive. So anyway, we're going to finally produce some units. We can build about 7 more. So, let's try to make our armies even here. So, we need 7. So, if we build... Let's see. This one would need... Let's give 3 infantry regiments for our first group here. And 2 infantry units for this group here. And then we'll build 1 unit of cavalry. And when you're building units, it's going to tell you in the province how much it's going to cost to build, which is relevant because certain provinces can build buildings that will lower the costs. And so it'll be cheaper to build units in one province over another. But that's more of a late game thing. Anyway, we're going to build one cavalry unit for each of our battle groups here. Okay, so now that those are all being produced, next time we will combine our armies, and then we will probably actually go to war with Aragon. So make sure to stay tuned. If I left anything out, make sure to leave a comment so I can maybe put an annotation on or something. And I hope to see you on the next one.